Sorry.
Chair, this afternoon we have evidence from Jane Stanford. Please can the witness be sworn?
I, Jane Stanford, do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Thank you. Please can you state your full name for the record?
Jane Dorothy Stanford.
You are the daughter of Dorothy, known as Dot Reddit, who was born on the 8th of March 1936 and died between the 15th and 16th of March 2021 at the age of 85. Is that right?
That's correct.
You would like me to refer to your mother as Dot throughout my questions?
Yes.
And you would like me to call you Jane?
Yes.
By way of background, the inquiry sent a Rule 9 request for evidence to your legal representatives on the 28th of January this year, and in response to that request, you've provided a witness statement to this inquiry. You have a copy of that witness statement in front of you, is that right? It is 64 pages long, and it is dated the 25th of June of this year.
That's right, yes.
At page 62, you made a statement of truth and then signed the witness statement. If you turn to almost the last page,
Yes.
you should see that there.
I have, yes.
Now, I'm going to be asking you a number of questions. If you can keep your voice up as much as you can, that would be extremely helpful. Thank you. Can I confirm, have you had an opportunity to read through your statement recently?
I have.
Now, I understand that there are two matters of correction to address, and I'll just deal with those now. So firstly, if you turn to page 101 of your witness statement, apologies, paragraph 101 of your witness statement, which you will see at page 18.
Yes.
We see there that your mother is assessed by a Dr. A, and it is recorded there as being dated the 20th of January 2021. To clarify, is it right that, based on the documentation you have seen, you understand the assessment of your mother by Dr. A took place on the 19th of January 2021?
That's correct, yes. The date is of when the report was actually prepared.
If you could try and keep your voice just up a little bit.
Sorry.
You were saying that it was when the report was written up, is that correct?
That's right. On the 20th of January it was written up, but the assessment happened on the 19th.
Thank you. I also want to deal with a matter of correction in relation to paragraph 1 of your witness statement on the first page. And we see there that it records your mother's death as occurring on the 16th of March 2021. At paragraph 273, you state that the coroner placed an approximate time of death of your mum being between the 15th and 16th of March 2021. Is it right that you understand that your mother's death occurred between the 15th and 16th of March?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Aside from those corrections, is your statement true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
Thank you. Now, as you know, this witness statement will therefore stand as your evidence to the inquiry. Although I am going to ask you questions about this witness statement, I'm not going to take you through every line or ask you to read it out. And please, though, do be assured that the chair and the inquiry team have read and considered everything you say in that statement very carefully, and it will form part of the body of the evidence on which this inquiry will rely. I would also like to acknowledge that you have provided a commemorative and impact account in relation to your mother, Dot, and the inquiry is extremely grateful to you for that evidence, as well as the evidence you're giving today. I'd like to remind you that I will not be asking you to name any individual members of staff today, so please try not to do so. And we will be taking a break every hour, but if you require further breaks, please do bring my attention to it. Your evidence will focus on your concerns in relation to your mother's care and treatment under the care of Essex Partnership University NHS Foundation Trust, which we'll be referring to as EPUT. You state that the events within your statement come from both your recollection, what you've been told by others, including your father and your aunt, and also documents that you have seen in your possession, including those you list on the last 2 pages of your statement. Is that right?
That's correct.
I'd like to start by setting out a timeline of Dot's involvement with Essex Mental Health Services. I will summarise the timeline and key dates taken from your witness statement, but please do stop me if I summarise anything incorrectly. And please do feel free to refer to your statement as you wish throughout my questions. As I understand it, according to your witness statement, your mother had a long-standing history of mental ill health. When she was about 30 years old, she sought help from her GP for low mood, with treatment for depression beginning at that time, and she remained on medication from that point onwards.
Yes, that's correct.
Over the years, your mother frequently experienced cycles of withdrawal, rage, and emotional shutdown. And as far as you are aware, there was no formal diagnosis provided by anyone other than the GPs that treated her over those years.
That's correct.
In October to November 2018, your mother experienced a serious deterioration in her mental health whilst transitioning between 2 antidepressant medications. After she left the house and police were called, she was taken to Broomfield Hospital Accident and Emergency for a mental health assessment, but was not admitted. Is that right?
That's correct.
After this time, your mother's previously episodic withdrawal and rages evolved into a persistent low mood coupled with irritability and aggression. Is that right?
That's correct.
Moving forward to November 2020, at your mother's request, the GP changed her antidepressant medication from sertraline to mirtazapine, leading to a further decline in her mental health, with signs of manic behaviour, agitation and irritability.
That's correct.
And in late December 2020 to early January 2021, your mother's mental health continued to deteriorate. She was highly irritable, aggressive and manic.
That's correct.
At this time, you observed your mother's behaviour to be very paranoid, and you describe your father telling the GP that your mother was experiencing insomnia and was shouting and crying.
That's correct.
On the 18th of January 2021, your mother threatened to kill your father, hit him over the head with a remote control, and locked him out of the house. Is that right?
That's correct.
When she would not let your father back into the house, a neighbour called the police. You and a police officer entered the address with your spare key, and after attempting to speak to your mother, you took your father with you and left your mother at the address, calling the GP thereafter to explain your concern for your mother's safety. And the GP confirmed that she would call the access team to visit your mother at home that evening.
That's correct.
Later that afternoon, still on the 18th of January, your mother called the GP surgery to report that she had taken an overdose. The GP called an ambulance for her, and she was taken to Broomfield Hospital Accident and Emergency.
That's correct.
Your mother underwent a mental health assessment and agreed to voluntary admission to Ruby Ward at the Crystal Centre.
That's correct.
You were informed that if she had refused voluntary admission, she would have been sectioned.
That's correct.
Your mother then spent 2 days at Haybridge Ward,
That's correct.
and on the 19th of January, she was assessed by a consultant psychiatrist who we will be referring to as Dr. A.
That's correct.
She was diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder, and your mother was then admitted to the Ruby Ward.
That's correct.
On the 22nd of January, your mother was assessed by another consultant psychiatrist who we will be referring to as Dr. B. You spoke to Dr. B that day, and he told you that your mother had borderline personality disorder. Is that right?
That's correct.
That this was not a mental health disorder, that your mother could therefore not be sectioned, and that he had withdrawn all her medication.
That's correct.
On the 9th of February, you and your family attended a multidisciplinary video call Teams meeting with Dr. B, social services and others to discuss the safeguarding of your father.
That's correct.
you were told that the conclusion of the safeguarding investigation was outstanding and that your mother was free to self-discharge, and that if she did so, the police would be called. Is that right?
That's correct.
On the 14th of February, whilst your mother was still an inpatient at Ruby Ward, your mother's care plan recorded that if she attempted to leave the ward, due to the ongoing safeguarding investigation, that police would be informed and she would potentially be held under section.
That's correct.
On the 15th of February, ward staff called your father and then you, insisting that your father return your mother's keys to the house as she wanted to come home and threatening police action.
That's correct.
On the 20th of February, your mother discharged herself from Ruby Ward, at which point, in accordance with Dr. B's plan, the police were called to attend but refused on the basis that it was a matter for social services. Is that right?
That's correct.
Social services were not contacted at this point, but an on-call registrar persuaded your mother to return to Ruby Ward. On the 22nd of February, your father received a further call from Ruby Ward staff insisting that he agreed to your mother coming home. Is that right?
That's correct.
On the 4th of March, your mother then discharged herself from Ruby Ward, returning to the home address she had previously shared with your father. And as advised, your father called the police, who attended and sought emergency accommodation for your mother, as social services had not been notified of her discharge. Is that right?
That's correct.
On the 5th of March, you contacted social services, who collected your mother from the overnight accommodation that police had arranged and arranged temporary accommodation for her.
That's correct.
On the 9th of March, your mother took an overdose. You were contacted by a doctor at Broomfield A&E that evening seeking background information. Is that right?
That's correct.
Your mother was then discharged at 11 p.m. back to her temporary accommodation, and neither you nor social services were notified of her discharge.
That's correct.
On the 10th of March, there was a multidisciplinary team discussion about your mother, at which concerns were raised about diagnosis, isolation, and overdose risk. Is that right?
Yes.
On the 12th of March, your mother's care coordinator informed your mother that she had been referred to home first, but when she refused visits from the home treatment team and denied suicidal ideation, the gatekeeping assessment was withdrawn.
That's correct.
On the 13th of March, your mother returned to your father's and formerly her home address. Police were again called, but rather than persuading your mother to return to her temporary accommodation, your mother was readmitted to the address and you and your father were arrested.
That's correct.
On the 15th of March, you notified social services of this incident that had taken place on the 13th of March.
That's correct.
The following day, on the 16th of March, your mother was found dead at your parents' home address, locked in the bathroom with evidence of self-harm.
Yes, that's correct.
You understand that there was a post-mortem examination which took place and which concluded that the cause of death was old age.
That's correct, yes, as they couldn't find any correlation between the self-harm and her death.
Thank you. And you understand that your mother died, as we've discussed, between the 15th and 16th
that's
of March.
correct.
Are you happy that that is a summary of the key chronology of the dates and events taken from your witness statement?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge, yes.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask you some questions about your concerns in relation to your mother's care and treatment. And I will go through those thematically and start, firstly, to ask you some questions about your concerns in relation to your mother's unclear diagnosis and the impact that this had on her treatment. I'm going to refer to different parts of the witness statement. If it helps you, I'm going to start by looking at paragraphs 119 to 124 and turning first this is page 21, turning first to the call that you received from Dr. B on the 22nd of January.
Yeah.
Now, you explained that Dr. B told you that he had spent 3 hours with your mother and an hour-long call with your father before he called you. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And during that call, when you pressed Dr. B for a diagnosis, he told you that your mother had borderline personality disorder,
That's correct.
but stressed this was not a mental disorder and no manic or psychotic observations had been made.
That's correct.
Your recollection of the conversation you had with Dr. B on the 22nd of January is based on notes you made at the time, is that right?
That's correct, yes. And also the medical records.
Yes.
There are some notes that he wrote in the medical records with regard to that.
Yes, and so a combination of the
Exactly.
notes you had made at the
Yes.
time and also the medical records you have since seen, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And is it your recollection that Dr. B told you that therapy would not work, that he did not wish to place a therapist in a position where they would be manipulated, and that your mother's overdose was to seek attention?
That's correct.
In terms of medication, is it right that you recall Dr. B telling you that medication would not work, as depression and anxiety medication would have a limited effect to dampen symptoms, and telling you that he had removed all medications and would not treat your mother?
That's correct.
Thank you. Is it right that you recall Dr. B saying that because borderline personality disorder was not a mental health disorder, your mother could not be sectioned for her own safety or that of others?
That's correct.
And you describe in your statement being so shocked and alarmed by what you'd been told that you contacted the charity Mind UK, is that
That's
right?
correct, yes.
Was that following your contact with Dr. B or sometime thereafter?
It was following contact with Dr. B, yes.
On the same day or some days thereafter?
I can't recall exact dates, sorry.
No problem. You explain that you understood when you did speak to Mind UK that the use of the Mental Health Act was appropriate if a person is likely to harm themselves or others, and that this applies to all mental health conditions diagnosed in psychiatry, of which borderline personality disorder is one.
That's correct, that's what they told me.
And you understood from Mind UK that there were treatments for borderline personality disorder, including dialectical behaviour therapy and mentalisation therapy, is that right?
That's correct.
I want to turn back now to the 19th of January 2021, when your mother had been assessed by a separate consultant psychiatrist who we'll be referring to as Dr. A.
Yes.
In Dr. A's report, following assessment of your mother, you understand that she gave your mother a diagnosis of bipolar affective disorder, current episode mixed, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And that's your understanding from having looked at the report.
That's correct, yes.
And from that report, you've noted that Dr. A observed that your mother was presenting with a mixed affective picture. She is irritable and pressured and manic in her presentation with suicidal thoughts. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And speech is described in that report, as you understand it, as mildly manic.
That's right.
Dr. A's recommendation from that report, as you understand it, was for full active treatment, and that admission to stabilise her mood is needed in a supervised environment before community care can be considered.
That's correct.
Dr. A's conclusion, and you quote this at paragraph 129 of your statement, which is on page 22, was that there is a potential and chronic event of misadventure remains given pattern of long-standing risk.
That's correct.
Is it right that as family members, you only became aware of Dr. A's assessment and diagnosis of your mother on the 15th of February, when you were provided with correspondence relating to your mother by her GP?
That's correct.
And so slightly less than a month after you had had your conversation with Dr. B.
Yes.
You explain in your statement that Dr. A's findings seemed to you to be in complete contrast to everything that Dr. B and the Ruby ward had told your family, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And is it right that after seeing Dr. A's report, your sister submitted a complaint to the Patient Advice and Liaison Service, PALS?
Yes, that's correct.
You have since seen from the records that on the 22nd of January, Dr. B, who was conducting the assessment of your mother on that date, had a phone call with Dr. A, who told him that your mother is presenting with a mixed affective presentation, having been admitted following an overdose.
That's correct.
And you also, quote, then presenting as irritable and hypomanic, and that it is Dr. A's view that this lady would be a significant risk to herself and her husband, and that consideration should be given to detention under the Mental Health Act if she tried to leave.
That's correct.
You note from the records that you have seen that Dr. B does not mention Dr. A's diagnosis of bipolar affective disorder and does not offer any explanation for the difference between their opinions. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Have you ever been provided with any reason or explanation as to why there was a difference between the opinions of Dr. A or Dr. B?
No, never.
I want to turn to some of the record keeping in this regard. And in terms of how your mother's mental health condition is described throughout the records you have seen, is it right that you have seen her condition repeatedly recorded as manic depression?
That's correct, yes.
A term previously used to describe bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And that this term continues to be used in the records up until her discharge on the 4th of March.
That's right, and there's also correspondence between other services, social services, which actually still describes her condition as bipolar.
Yes, and you've noted that manic depression is recorded in the medical notes from the day of your mother's discharge on the 4th of March,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
and on the Essex Police Mental Health Street Triage screening form,
That's correct.
which you understand the ward sent to the police on the 4th of March. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And thereafter, following your mother's overdose on the 9th of March, when she was assessed at Broomfield A&E, the HCP nurse, you have noted, has recorded your mother's diagnosis as personality disorder, not bipolar disorder or manic depression.
That's correct, yes.
Then on the 10th of March, you have noted that when your mother was discussed at the multidisciplinary team meeting, her diagnosis is again listed as bipolar by the same Dr. A who had initially seen her on the 19th
That's correct, yes.
of January. And this diagnosis of bipolar then appears in an email to your mother's community care coordinator on the same afternoon.
That's correct, yes.
You've also noted that your mother's care coordinator's visit, which takes place on the 10th of March, the note of that then records her diagnosis as BPD, so borderline personality disorder.
That's correct, yes.
And so from the records you have seen, although on Dr. B's 27th of January ward review, you note that he seems to point towards personality disorder as your mother's diagnosis, is it right that you understand that he doesn't formally record borderline personality disorder in the medical records and only confirms that diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, emotionally unstable, to the PSI investigation team after your mother's death?
That's correct, yes.
You refer in your statement to continuing diagnostic confusion within the records. Your impression at the time, what was your impression as to what the diagnosis of your mother was whilst she was an inpatient at the Ruby ward?
Because it was COVID restrictions were in place, and we were initially told by a psychiatric nurse there would be no contact with mum for at least 14 days, and obviously with COVID restrictions it wasn't possible to go and visit. So I made no observation whilst mum was on Ruby ward at all. I was reliant totally on what Ruby ward was actually telling us. And as you pointed out before, we didn't realise there was another diagnosis until I think it was about the 16th of February, a month after mum was on the ward. So yeah, the confusion was I mean, I don't know. I'm not a medical health expert. I wouldn't know the difference between bipolar. The only thing that I do know is that both of those mental illnesses can actually present at the same time. I've read somewhere, whether that's true or not, I don't know.
And in terms of what you were told by the Ruby ward, did you have an understanding that this may be bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, or a combination, or was it your understanding at this point that it was borderline personality disorder?
That was our only understanding up until the 15th, 16th of February, when the GP released Dr. A's assessment that was done on the 19th of January, the day after Mum was admitted after the first overdose.
And the only condition that was in your mind at that point was the borderline personality disorder condition?
Exactly, yes.
I want to turn to the impact that the diagnostic confusion or the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder had on the treatment that your mother received. As far as you were aware, was your mother given any therapeutic treatment during her admission to Ruby Ward?
The only thing that I remember that Mum filled in on a little diary that she kept was that she received sort of like exercise classes. There doesn't appear to be anything, and there's nothing on the medical records that says she received any sort of therapy, counselling, or anything like that at all.
Thank you. Now, you've explained in your statement that your mother had taken medication for depression continuously for as long as you could remember.
Yes.
And when your mother was taken to A&E at Brimfield Hospital following an overdose on the 18th of January, she was on 30 milligrams of mirtazapine, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
You've seen in the records, you refer to Dr. A discontinuing your mother's mirtazapine dose on the 20th of January, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And the Ruby Ward drug chart, you understand, indicates that she was prescribed lorazepam, 0.5 milligram, and olanzapine, 2.5 milligrams.
That's correct, yes.
And then on the 3rd of February, you have noted in your statement an entry to stop olanzapine.
That's correct, yes.
Which you describe as particularly concerning because you understand that olanzapine appears to be used to treat mania or mixed episode that is part of bipolar disorder.
That's correct, yes.
And that it must continue to be taken and withdrawn gradually under medical supervision.
That's correct, yes.
Is it right that the effectiveness of olanzapine and lorazepam are not evaluated in the medical records that you have seen, so whether they were working or not?
No, there's no evaluation at all.
And is it right that it appears to you that lorazepam was still being prescribed on the 14th of February, according to the records?
Yes, I mean, obviously without seeing the drug charts, but that would... I mean, I know that by the time Mum was discharged, I don't know whether it was the first time she did the self-discharge, but I don't think that she was being treated at all with any drugs, apart from a type of antihistamine that was available to her on demand. All of those have been withdrawn.
Yes, and is it right that you understood that those drugs had been withdrawn because your mother's discharge drug chart from the 4th of March was later found in her possessions after her death?
That's right, the drug chart that she took away with her from the ward, did actually show that neither of those drugs were shown on it.
Is it right that as far as you are aware, there are no records directing that lorazepam should be withdrawn, nor any explanation given within the records for the withdrawal of either drug?
No, there's nothing at all.
I want to turn now to the topic of safeguarding and the concerns that you had in relation to how the safeguarding of your father was dealt with. If it assists, I'm looking at paragraphs 131 to 133 of your statement, which start at page 22. And here you point to records you've seen dating from the 22nd of January 2021, indicating that the Ruby ward was aware of risk to your father, and in particular, you refer at paragraph 132 to a review carried out by staff and a support worker, which records that your mother is still cross with her husband and this may escalate if she goes home now. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And then at paragraph 131, the paragraph above, Dr. A's view that this lady would be a significant risk to herself and her husband, and that consideration should be given to detention under the Mental Health Act if she tried to leave.
That's correct, yes.
Which you understood that she had expressed in the 22nd of January call to Dr. B.
That's correct, yes.
And then at paragraph 133, you have noted your understanding of Dr. B's own assessment, which records that threats to kill made by your mother against your father and family concerns that your father must be safeguarded were recorded in that assessment. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
I want to turn now to what happened at the video call Teams meeting on the 9th of February 2021. And is it right, this was a multidisciplinary team meeting on Teams attended by Dr. B, the ward manager, a social work manager for older adults, amongst others, and to which your family was invited and attended?
Yes, that's correct.
And is it right that you were present, your sister, your husband, and your father?
That's correct, yes.
You explained that you had been assured that this was to be a safeguarding meeting focused on how your father could be protected from your mother's aggression and violence and to find a workable solution for your mother's discharge. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
You say in your statement that the written record you've seen of the meeting you feel is out of context, not chronological and containing falsehoods. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And in particular, you mentioned that the history, observation and events you as a family gave concerning your mother's difficult behaviour does not appear in the medical record note of that meeting. Is that
That's
right?
correct, yes.
And so when you talk about the gaps in that meeting note, is that principally what you're referring to, the lack of mention of,
Yes,
of
that's
those
right,
aspects?
yes. That our observations were not recorded at all, and they were quite extensive. I mean, the meeting went on for a little over an hour, but there was no recording of what actually we said as a family at all.
Thank you. Now, in the meeting, your father, is it right, gave a statement which is partially recorded in the medical records, but not completely. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And in that, he described what he'd been through trying to cope with your mother's crisis, and he made it clear he could no longer cope and broke down and cried as he recalled the abuse that he'd experienced. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And having seen that record, is it your view that it doesn't reflect that aspect of what was said in the meeting?
Not at all. I mean, yes, what Dad said wasn't taken on board at all.
Now, in the medical records of that meeting, you have set out that Dr. B outlined that your mother had developed a personality where she gets defensive if people question her and can become aggressive if people don't agree. Most of these aggressive episodes are limited to their family as they can control these urges, and that your mother can manipulate the situation. Is that right?
That's what he recorded, yes.
And is that consistent with what you recall him saying at the meeting?
It is.
Now, although Dr. B, as you've recorded it, recognised these behaviours in the meeting, you've described finding that he made no suggestions as to how to manage them or support your family to do so. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you felt, as you've set out in your statement, that he became very defensive at any suggestion that the risks to your father must be considered and resolved, and proper assurances given that your mother was well enough and sufficiently supported to be safely discharged.
Yeah, he gave no assurances, and social services also were very worried about the fact that Dad's safeguarding was not being considered properly by the ward.
And is it right that the social work manager stepped in during the meeting to explain that safeguarding had been raised and was presently with EPUT and that she would look into that?
That's correct, yes, she did.
What was your understanding as to the stage safeguarding investigation had reached at that point on the 9th of February?
As a family, we were given no information about e-put safeguarding, what it involved, who would be doing it. I mean, even at that stage, at that meeting, no one knew who was actually doing the safeguarding investigation on behalf of e-put at all. And the culmination at the end of the meeting was that the social worker was going to look into that and find out who was doing it and at what stage it was.
Was it your impression that social services were taking on responsibility for safeguarding from that point on?
It seemed like that because we had the family, including my father, had a meeting with social services afterwards, and she did actually say that she would start to get the police involved under the DASH process as a means to safeguard my father, yes.
And in terms of the e-put investigation, were you given any point of contact in terms of the safeguarding investigation or who you should speak to about it?
Not at all.
You explain in your statement that during the meeting, Dr. B confirmed that he would allow your mother to leave the ward and saw no reason for her not to go home as she co-owned the house with your father. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Can I just be absolutely clear? The impression you got was that social services were going to take over responsibility for the safeguarding of your father.
It did seem like that, yes.
Notwithstanding that e-put were going to go on doing their own investigations. Is that how it...
I don't know what they did or spoke about between themselves,
Right.
but it did appear very disjointed. Like I say, we didn't know anything about the e-put investigation at all. We were
Right.
never given any
Okay.
details.
Thank you.
And so when you mentioned DASH, was that your understanding in terms of other avenues effectively for your father to be safeguarded, so involving social services on the other side of things?
That's correct. It was sort of an added layer. I mean, I don't know why social services decided to go down that route. I don't know whether they felt that e-put wasn't doing enough to safeguard Dad. I'm not sure what their reasoning behind that was, but that's what we were told by social services. That was the direction they were going to point my father towards to trying to keep himself safe.
And is it right that you recall that at that meeting the social work manager made the point that she felt sending your mother home would be dangerous and that in her experience this would allow aggressive behaviours to be reinforced?
Yes, she said that to us. I think it was not actually at the meeting, but it was the meeting we had with her afterwards, because she said she'd experienced this particular situation before and said that the danger to the family was enough to warrant putting safeguarding in place for Dad.
Thank you. And is it right that there's, of course, the medical record of that meeting, but also you took your own note of that meeting?
I did, yes.
At the conclusion of that meeting, as far as you understood it, was there a solution to the issue of safeguarding your father or accommodation for your mother if she self-discharged?
Not at all.
And so when you left that meeting, what was your understanding as to what was going to happen to your mother at that point?
We didn't know at all. We were just deeply concerned. We had no idea that it was out of our hands. It was... we were desperate to try and keep Mum safe, but it didn't appear that anybody wanted to listen.
And you've now seen your mother's care plan from the 14th of February, so some 5 days on, which you record, and this is at paragraph 197, you record under risk and management refers to risk of OD, overdose, when feeling neglected, along with self-neglect, vulnerability, emotional state. And it also records, and this is at paragraph 198, I understand that until the safeguard is investigated and we are aware of the outcome, I will remain here as an informal patient until it is resolved.
That's correct.
And this is the extract that you have put into your statement. I am fully aware if I attempt to leave the ward at present, due to the ongoing safeguard open, that police will be informed and I will potentially be held under section. That's obviously from the medical records which you have seen subsequently.
Yes.
Was this information and this plan communicated to you at this stage?
Not at all.
Were you aware, some 5 days on from the meeting, or updated in relation to what the plan was in relation to your mother?
Not at all.
I want to turn to the next day, the 15th of February, and calls made to your family. You describe, and this is at paragraph 184 and 185 of your statement. And here you describe Ruby Ward staff calling your father, insisting that he return your mother's belongings, including her keys, which had been provided to you when she was admitted and you had passed on to him so that she could return home. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And when your father refused, you understand that 2 further members of staff then spoke to him, threatening him with police action.
That's correct, yes.
After Ruby Ward had called your father, you recall that he called you in floods of tears. Is that right?
He did, yes.
You received a missed call, and when you called back, you were confronted with a loudspeaker call involving 3 doctors and a matron from the Ruby Ward. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you also then faced threats of police action. Is that right?
I did, yes.
Is it right that at the end of the 15th of February call, you made clear that you should be contacted first rather than your father?
I did, yes, because Dad was just too upset by the bullying that they were clearly carrying out.
Yes, and you describe in the statement the call that you had as very heated and confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that you would want to add in terms of the interaction that you had with staff on this phone call?
It wasn't what I would have expected from staff, professional staff. I just would never have expected them to have behaved like that. And the thing that upset me more when I read the medical records, it was never recorded that they phoned my father first and left him in floods of tears. They only recorded my telephone conversation with them, and only very briefly.
And so there was a brief record of your call, but no record, as far as you can see, of the call
That's right, yeah.
your father had?
Yes.
And is it right that at this point, the EPUT safeguarding investigation was still ongoing?
Yes, my father asked in his phone call at what point the safeguarding was. I also asked, and I was told that it hadn't been completed. So I said, well, unless that's done, we can't have Mum home because we can't cope with and keep her safe.
And is it right that, in fact, the EPUT safeguarding investigation remained open until your mother's death?
It did.
After your mother's death, in the context of a PSI investigation report, is it right that you were told that there were staff shortages in safeguarding roles?
That's correct, yes, because once I got sight of the medical records, I realised that the safeguarding expert that was recruited for the PSI had also been involved in Mum's care and was the safeguarding expert called in by EPUT. So there was a conflict there, and I picked up the PSI team on this. They apologised and said that the team leader should have checked, but he also said that there wasn't enough safeguarding staff. He said, so we would have found it very difficult to find somebody who wasn't involved in your mum's care.
Were you told whether or not those shortages may have impacted upon the time taken to undertake safeguarding in your mother's case?
Not at all.
Now, from the records you have seen, turning back to the February, it appears that social services called Ruby Ward on the 18th of February 2021, saying that safeguarding was raised, and if your mother entered the home address, she was at risk of arrest.
That's correct, Jessica. By at this point, Essex Police had interviewed my father and myself, and it had been decided that they would put a red flag on Dad's telephone number, and that they would attend to to protect him from domestic abuse under blue light. That was the agreement that the police gave. That's the protection that they gave Dad, yes.
And if you turn to paragraph 94, which is at page 17 of your statement, you refer there to your father later admitting to Essex Police and Social Services that he had contemplated suicide himself, feeling he had no way out. Is that a reference to that meeting that had been had between the police and your father?
It was, yes. I mean, this is the first that I knew. Well, I don't say it was the first I knew of it. There was an incident on Boxing Day in January where Mum said that Dad had been talking about wanting to take his life because he couldn't cope anymore. So actually it wasn't the first time that I'd heard. It was the first time he'd actually admitted to the services that that's how he had felt because he could no longer cope with Mum and her behaviours. He couldn't keep her safe.
And so, as far as you're aware, this meeting, which is referred to on at paragraph 94 of your statement, was the first time that your father expressed that level of need for support to services.
That's correct, yes.
And that meeting that's described in paragraph 94 happened before the 18th of February, is that right?
Yes, I believe it happened on the 17th of February. I did look it up, yeah.
On the 22nd of February, you describe another call to your father from someone on Ruby Ward, insisting that he agreed to your mother coming home, and again, your father ringing you in tears after the call, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you have expressed your view that this was bullying on the part of the ward. You also explain in your statement that at this stage, your father had come to the realisation that he could no longer live with your mother if there was no hope of treatment or any clinical intent to resolve her mental ill health. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you say that he was effectively left with no alternative but to take legal action.
Yes, this is what he was advised by social services. It was the only route that he had to keep himself safe. And when he did consult a solicitor, they said the only thing that he could do was a non-molestation order and to divorce my mum.
Yes. And that is the legal action that you were talking about in your statement there, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
I want to turn, and we may not complete this next section before a break, but I want to turn to the topic and your concerns in relation to your mother's discharge.
Yes.
Firstly, is it right that your mother attempted to discharge herself from the ward on the 20th of February, as you understand it?
That's correct, yes.
And as you understand the records, ward staff followed the plan of calling the police to attend and assist.
That's correct, yes.
And again, this is paragraphs 216 to 220 of your statement that you deal with this aspect and what took place, which are page 38 of your statement. You understand that the on-call doctor had not seen your mother before she discharged herself from the ward and staff called police, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
And when police were called, you understand that they refused to attend and confirmed to the ward that this was a matter for social services rather than the police.
That's correct, because both myself and my sister did actually receive out of the blue telephone calls from Essex Police to this effect, saying that they would not attend and that it was a social services and a duty of care issue for the ward.
And so contact had been made by the Ruby ward, as you understand it, to the police.
Yes.
And the police contacted you.
That's correct, yes.
And that's how you became aware of it, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And at this point, are you aware whether the ward or the police called social services, given that the suggestion was social services were the right service?
We did not know, and I can't remember who it was. I can't remember whether it was myself or my sister. I have a feeling it was me. I phoned social services after the police had talked to us, asking them, and they said that they couldn't act unless Ruby Ward or the police asked them to act.
You understand from the records that the on-call registrar managed to persuade your mother to stay on the ward, is that right?
He did, yes.
And from what you've seen, is it right that that on-call registrar instructed that nursing staff should utilise Section 5.4 power under the Mental Health Act, enabling them to detain your mother for up to 6 hours in order to inform the on-call doctor, who then used the Section 5.2 power to detain for up to 72 hours, is that right?
That was his recommendation, yes.
And from what you've seen, it appears that a Datex incident report was made.
That's correct, yes.
And from your reading, the on-call doctor has recorded that it will not be safe for your mother to leave the ward without a safe discharge plan, and that he will discuss the discharge plan with the ward team and consultant. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
But you have not seen a record to indicate that this happened, is that right?
No, there's nothing on the medical records that shows that that ever took place.
Is it right that you don't know whether either of the on-call doctors discussed a safe discharge plan with Dr. B and the ward team, or whether any Mental Health Act powers were used and what the outcome was of the Datex report?
We don't know anything, no, not at all.
And from the records you have seen, is it right that it appears that the discharge plan from the 20th of February was not reviewed?
It doesn't look like it, no.
Now, on the 4th of March, your mother discharged herself from Ruby Ward. I'm conscious that we are due a break in the next few minutes. I want to chair, before I move on to that topic, whether we should take a break slightly earlier for 15 minutes and then return and can continue at that stage.
I think that sounds
No, that's fine, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Jane, before we start, can I just remind you to try and keep your voice as loud as you can?
Okay, I'll try it.
I appreciate it can be very difficult, but we just want to ensure that the transcript captures everything you're saying and that you can be heard. We've moved the microphone slightly, so hopefully that's a little better.
Okay, thank you.
And I may remind you if your voice drops again.
Yes, thank you.
We were just about to turn to the 4th of March when your mother discharged herself from Ruby Ward. I want to briefly just draw your attention to some of the correspondence you refer to. You refer to an email from that day, the 4th of March, from a senior social work practitioner from the mental health team to an RMN, so a registered mental health nurse, raising concerns about care and safeguarding around the imminent discharge, and highlighting a problem regarding who was responsible for arranging accommodation, and noting several documents being missing, for example, the care needs assessment and occupational therapy assessment.
That's correct, yes.
At this point, on the morning of the 4th of March, before your mother returned to the address, were you aware that she was due to be discharged?
Not at all.
Had anything been communicated to you or your father in the days leading up about discharge being imminent?
Not at all.
Is it right that on the 3rd of March there had been calls from your mother to family members?
Yes.
And are you able to say something about how many, what calls you received?
There are a number of calls to my nephews, mum's grandchildren, to me, to my sister, and also to my father. My father initially answered a telephone call to mum where she said that she was coming home, and Dad tried to speak with her about the fact that there was safeguarding that was still not been resolved. Mum became very agitated, so Dad didn't continue the call. My sister spoke with my mum for a short period of time, just basically to try and find out whether she was safe and where she was, and she confirmed she was still on the ward and that she was safe. But nobody from the ward contacted us at all. Dad was very upset because Mum said that she was coming home. I went over there that evening and spent the evening with him because he was really quite frightened. But no, we were never told by the ward or anybody else that Mum was imminently to come home. My eldest nephew, he was at work at the time, and he got the missed calls from Mum, and he phoned the ward and spoke with the ward manager and said, you know, we don't know anything about, you know, my grandmother coming home, and you're upsetting her husband, and is it safe to send her home? He was asking lots of questions. But the conversation was abruptly shut down because the ward manager just put the phone down on him. So we weren't to know that imminently Mum was to come home at all. We weren't notified by the ward at all.
And is it right that at this point your mother didn't have a mobile phone, and so you understand that the phone calls must have been made from a phone on the ward, as it were, with,
Yes.
with permission?
The medical records actually confirm that the calls were made from the ward office phone.
Thank you. Now, you refer in your statement to emails from the 15th of March, sometime thereafter, but from social services to Ruby Ward and the ward manager, indicating the possibility of inappropriate discharge and stating that there was no discharge planning. Ward staff, you say you've seen records in relation to ward staff seeming not to know that they had to follow duties to make a duty to referral to the local authority, and that ward staff did not inform the older adult social care team on the day of discharge, so they were unable to fulfil their duties, including well-being. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Now, is it right that you have since learned, it's your understanding, that from the PSI investigation report, that the discharge coordinator's job was vacant on Ruby Ward at the time of your mother's discharge?
Yes, it was.
There is, you've referred to an entry in the medical records from the care coordinator to suggest that your family had been contacted by the ward. Is it your evidence that family members were not contacted on that day, and that the record of a reaction from you stating family dynamic going on already is entirely false?
That's fabricated, yes. No one in the family was rung at all.
And as far as you were aware, no steps were taken to communicate the likely discharge to you, your father, or any other family member?
No one was contacted at all.
In terms of what that discharge was going to look like, from the records you have seen, is it right that you understand, in terms of community support for your mother on discharge, this appears to have consisted only of a check by the community care coordinator within 48 hours and a 7-day follow-up?
That's correct, yes.
This is your understanding from the records, but at any stage before, or indeed after your mother's discharge, were you made aware of any care plan outlining the support that she would receive when she was in the community?
Not at all.
I want to turn now to your mother's arrival at the home address, and that is set out at paragraphs 243 to 246 of your statement. Page 43 onwards. On the 4th of March, your mother arrived by taxi at the home she'd previously shared with your father, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And according to the PSI investigation report and the medical records, you understand that your mother was escorted by a member of ward staff to the address in the taxi, but they did not get out of the taxi, and your mother was left to gain access to the property without keys or a telephone alone.
That's correct, yes. My father didn't observe anybody else get out of the taxi other than the taxi driver and my mother.
And the taxi driver got out to take your mother's bags out of the taxi, is that
That's
right?
correct, yes, but he never saw anybody else.
You understand, is this right, that your mother knocked on the window to ask your father to let her in, and as advised by police and in accordance with the red flag alert, your father refused entry and immediately called the police?
That's correct, yes.
They arrived with blue lights as anticipated, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Is it right that your father then called you and you arrived about half an hour later?
That's correct, yes.
On this occasion of police attendance, what happened once you arrived at the address?
Mum was sitting in the police car with a special constable. I came into the property. Dad was immensely distressed, telling me that they're going to let Mum into the house. She will hurt me, and he was really very, very distressed. One of the main police, there was a police constable and 3 special police constables.
Just to be clear, and this is the 4th of March.
4th of March.
The when she is discharged.
Oh, sorry, no, I beg your pardon.
Not to worry, there is an incident on the 13th of March that we'll come to.
I'm getting confused with the two, sorry. Thank you for correcting me. Yes, on the 4th, police officers were there. There was 2 female police officers that came into the property. They assured my father that they would not let Mum into the property. She was being cared for by street triage police officers at a neighbour's property, and it was likely that they would find her accommodation and that Dad wasn't to worry. Police officers came and said that they'd arranged temporary accommodation for Mum, took her to a place of safety, and Dad provided money for a hotel overnight. Yes, that was the culmination of that. I mean, that incident, I mean, we were treated with respect. They understood the dangers to my father. Although we were immensely distressed that Mum had been discharged, and we didn't know that she was about to be discharged, and we were frantic with worry for her well-being, at least the police did, it appears, do the right thing on that occasion.
And is it right that whilst this was going on, officers advised you to contact social services to verify whether accommodation for your mother had been arranged?
That's correct, yes. I did ring them up in the presence of 2 female police officers to be told that the on-duty, on-call social worker didn't know anything about it, and they hadn't been informed that Mum had been discharged.
And so as you understood it at this point, there had been no notice to social services either in terms of the discharge?
Yes, because it was I believe it was their responsibility to organise accommodation until the safeguarding was organised. So, I don't know.
And on this occasion, the Essex Police street triage officers arranged emergency accommodation, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And the following day, on the 5th of March, you contacted social services and spoke to not the duty team but somebody else, and you say in your statement that they seemed equally alarmed and confused by the Ruby Ward's actions in allowing self-discharge without supported accommodation. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And at this point, is it your understanding that social services collected your mother from the overnight emergency accommodation and arranged temporary housing for her?
They did, yes.
You've explained that you spoke to the duty social worker the day preceding and to the police. Are you able to say whether the information you had given to the duty social worker or indeed the police had been passed on to social services that you spoke to on the 5th, or indeed the Ruby Ward?
I've no idea. They never said anything to us, so I don't know whether that happened or not.
Thank you. In terms of the communication between the different agencies and services. Following your mother's discharge, you describe in your statement there being no coordinated care in place, with all necessary support services disjointed, leaving your mother vulnerable and your family extremely worried. Was that your experience throughout this period?
Yes, definitely. Terrified. She was so vulnerable.
In your statement, you in particular explained that the Ruby Ward nurse was unable to conduct the required 24-hour follow-up call because your mother did not have a mobile phone. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, that's correct.
And as far as you have seen from the records, is there any indication that consideration was given to how your mother would be contacted once she left the Ruby Ward, given that it was anticipated that she may be refused entry to the family home?
Nothing was put in place at all, no means of communication, no accommodation, nothing was put in place at all.
And is it right that you understand that your mother's community care coordinator failed to reach your mother to conduct a 48-hour post-discharge check and instead therefore planned to visit on the 8th of March, 4 days after her discharge, but that in fact even this visit did not happen?
That's correct, because that's what it says in the medical records.
Thank you. I want to turn now to focus on the sequence of events following your mother's overdose on the 9th of March, about which you raised considerable concerns. Now,
Sorry, I've just got one.
Yes,
I'm a
of
bit
course.
confused. You said earlier that there had been evidence that there was no care coordinator at the time, that at the time of this discharge the role was vacant.
That was the discharge coordinator.
Oh, I'm so sorry, the discharge coordinator, not the care coordinator. I'm very, very sorry.
Discharge
Forgive
coordinator.
me. Thank you.
Thank you. Turning to the 9th of March, on the afternoon of the 9th of March, is it right that you received a call from your mother's social worker informing you that your mother had told her care coordinator that she had overdosed?
That's correct, yes.
And he had called an ambulance for her?
He had, yes.
Is it right that you were then called by A&E staff at Broomfield that evening
Yes, that's correct.
seeking background information?
That's correct, yes.
Can you recall what information you were asked to share? For example, did they ask you about your mother's mental health history, her recent inpatient admission, her discharge, your concerns? What information were you asked to share with
I was
them?
asked about the recent problems with Mum's mental health. Sorry, can you ask the question again? I've lost my train of
Just
thought.
to understand, when you say seeking background information,
Yeah.
what sort of information were you asked about?
Yes, I was asked about Mum's recent inpatient, also about her recent mental health crisis, which I relayed in quite a lot of depth. I pleaded with whoever it was I was speaking to at an A&E that Mum was very, very unwell and she was very, very vulnerable. She was only in temporary accommodation because of safeguarding issues with my father. And I asked if somebody would please help her, treat her.
Yes, and is it right that, in fact, you received no updates in relation to your mother, whether your mother had been admitted or otherwise that evening?
Yeah, the gentleman that I spoke to, he said that they would get mental health services in to do an assessment, but I have no idea what that assessment, what happened or the results of that assessment. When we had a complaint meeting after the PSI with an EPUT representative, we were told that A&E records are kept separate to Mum's medical records, and that they would ask for them to be so that we could see them, but I never have seen those A&E records. That assessment doesn't actually feature in her medical records at all, so I'm not quite sure why at 11 o'clock at night Mum was put in a taxi and sent back to her accommodation when I'd been assured that mental health would be called in and reassess her, and if she needed inpatient care she would be given it.
And so you understand that your mother was returned to her temporary accommodation at 11 p.m.
That's
and
correct.
no contact, as you understand, was sought to be made with you or any other family member.
That's correct, yes. Not even social services either. They didn't know about it until I phoned them and told them.
Given that you were not notified of your mother's discharge from A&E, is it right to say you were not provided with any documentation or guidance on how to support her in the community after this admission?
That's correct, yes.
Were you given any guidance in relation to a discharge or crisis plan at any point?
No, never.
Now, is it right that the following morning, on the 10th of March, when you hadn't heard anything, you contacted the hospital and found out that your mother had been discharged?
That's correct. That's how I found out.
And you contacted social services at that point, and they notified you that they had not known either?
That's correct, yes.
From what you have seen of your mother's records, it appears that your mother was discussed at a multidisciplinary team meeting on that morning of the 10th of March. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
With concerns raised regarding diagnosis, isolation and overdose risk.
That's correct, yes.
And is it your understanding that an urgent face-to-face consultation was requested with another doctor planned to contact your mother?
That's correct, yes.
And is it your understanding that an HCP nurse appears to have then left a message for your mother but not to have made direct contact?
That's correct, yes. That's what it says in the medical records, yes.
With regards to your mother's access to a mobile phone, you explain at paragraphs 261 to 266 that your mother had no working mobile phone at the time of her discharge. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And even when given one by her social worker, you say that she struggled to operate it. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And what was your view in terms of the impact that had on safety plans?
Well, there was even a recording in the medical records where the community care coordinator gave Mum a 111 number for her to use if she was in crisis. But of course, how could she make a call? She couldn't work the mobile phone that she did have. She was staying in temporary accommodation. There was a landline there, but I don't know whether that was for the people living there to use or whether it was for the people running the accommodation. I really don't know, but there was no way of contacting my mother at this point. The social worker, Mum's social worker, raised this with us as a family, saying that she was struggling to get Mum to understand how to operate the mobile phone.
And so would it be fair to say that in your view it was the offer of the crisis number was ineffective because of the difficulties your mother had with the phone?
Exactly.
Now, on the morning of the 10th of March, your mother's community care coordinator then confirmed that he was to visit for your mother and to refer her to gatekeeping. Is that your understanding?
That's what is written in the medical records, yes.
Your mother's community care coordinator, you understand, in his notes following his 10th of March visit, recorded that your mother was tearful, low in mood, expressed intrusive thoughts and denied plans of suicide, but was clearly vulnerable.
Yes.
And on the 11th of March, as you understand it, a multidisciplinary team zoning meeting assessed your mother's risk level as red, which you understand to mean in crisis.
I would have thought so, yes.
Your mother's care coordinator then contacted her on the 11th of March, again having to call the hotel as your mother still could not answer the phone, and gave I believe it may be the call you described in relation to the crisis line. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
On the 12th of March, it's your understanding, is it that the care coordinator visited your mother and told her that she was being referred to home first?
That's correct, yes.
But when your mother refused visits from the home treatment team and denied suicidal ideation, no acute risk is recorded and the gatekeeping assessment was withdrawn.
That's correct, yes.
You say in your statement that it appeared to you that your mother was withdrawing from the support.
Definitely, what I read in the medical records, yeah, definitely, and what the social workers have been telling us.
And have you seen anything in the records to indicate that the care coordinator was concerned about this withdrawal from support?
Nothing that I can recall.
I want to turn now to an incident on the 13th of March, which we began to spoke about a little bit earlier,
yes.
and it's another interaction with the police. Is
It
that
is,
right?
yes, that's correct.
And so on the 13th of March, your father, yourself, your mother and Essex Police are involved in an incident when your mother attended the address where she formerly lived with your father and where your father was living at the time. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
The police arrived with blue lights in line with the marker procedure deployed on the 4th of March, but is it right that on this occasion, rather than persuading your mother to return to her temporary accommodation, you say that they left your mother on the porch outside the house? Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Is it right that your mother then tried to break into the property?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
Are you able to say more about what took place during this incident?
When Mum tried to break in?
Yes,
Yes,
so
okay.
is it right that she tried to break into the property and was verbally abusive at the time?
She was, yes. She went to a shed in the garden and she got a brick, a shovel and a pair of secateurs. She was shouting and she was banging the side of the house and the windows with the shovel. She was prizing the woodwork away from the glass. She did considerable damage to the window. She managed to get a fan light open and reached through and got a blind and cut the blind with the secateurs that she had in her hand. At this point, my sister, who was present, she telephoned the police and said that Mum was trying to get into the house and being verbally abusive, and the police did turn up again under blue lights.
And so is it right... Apologies.
Sorry.
They'd already come, had they?
Yes.
And gone away?
And left Mum there with...
Just outside?
Outside in the porch, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it's an open porch, it's not just an open porch outside.
And so is it the same officers, different officers that arrive?
It's exactly the same officers.
And so you were just about to tell us the officer returned, and what happened at that point?
I showed her a short video that I'd taken of Mum trying to get into the window and the damage that she'd done. The police officer disregarded it and said, "It's your mother's house, she's allowed to damage it." She said to me, "You should have let your mum in, it's her house." And I said, "But would you have let them in if they were wielding a shovel and secateurs and a brick?" You know, we were terrified. And she didn't say anything to that.
And at this point, is it right that you called social services in the presence of your father and the police officer?
Yes, at some point during this, and I can't actually remember whether it was the first time they came or the second time, but at some point, someone phoned social services. I can't remember whether it was me, my sister, or the police, but a telephone call with the on-call social services was on loudspeaker, and the police officer said, sort of outlined the situation and said that she felt that Mum should have access to the house, and the social worker made it plain that yes, on a legal basis, Mum had a right to be in the property, but if there was a safeguarding issue, especially one that hadn't been resolved, that the police shouldn't allow Mum into the property if Dad was in danger. The police officer went on to disregard this, was insistent that Mum came into the property, and Dad became most upset. She didn't pursue this, yes, sorry.
No, please take your
That's
time.
right.
There's water there if it helps.
Yes, thank you.
You describe in your statement this incident as long, protracted, terrifying and traumatic.
Yes.
And you explained that it lasted approximately 4 hours. Is that right?
It did, yes.
At some point, your mother accused you and your father of stealing her bank card money and keys. Is that right?
This was the number of items that the hospital had released to us because they had no safe storage for it. So there was a number of items that were released to me. I signed for them, and the nurse who gave them over to me at Ruby Ward also signed. And Mum had also signed a piece of paper, although I didn't do it in the presence of Mum. She'd signed what I recognised to be her signature, giving me permission to take these items. I then took them home and gave them to my father for safekeeping. So, I don't know, theoretically I hadn't stolen them at all. They'd been given to me for safekeeping.
And is it right that both you and your father were then arrested on suspicion of theft and taken to Basildon Police Station?
Yes. First of all, body-worn camera footage shows that the officer says that myself and my father must leave the property for our own safety, or she would arrest us for our own safety. My father refused to leave. He was 93 years of age, so I opted to stay with him and not leave the property, to remain with him. And then the tack was changed, where we were then told that we would be arrested on suspicion of theft. So obviously that's what happened, and we ended up at Basildon Police Station. On our arrival, police records actually show that the sergeant wouldn't detain either me or my father, because it is recorded that certain, I think this is something called PACE, was not met with our arrests. So we were sent home straight away. Police officers took myself and my father to my home, and then we both gave statements under caution.
And at this point, you and your father are at your home.
Yes.
And as you understand it, your mother is then at the address and she remains there until her death. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And as far as you are aware, following this is the 13th, the Saturday.
Yes.
On the 13th, the Saturday, or on the Sunday, are you aware of whether the officers in attendance, or indeed the social worker that you spoke to on the phone, had spoken to Ruby Ward or your mother's care coordinator, or called social services? As far as you were aware from the records you've seen or what you know, had there been any communication of what had happened?
There's nothing in the medical records that shows that that happened, and myself and the family weren't told that the social services had been told where Mum was now residing.
And again, on the Monday morning, so the 15th of March, you called social services, who you describe expressing shock at not having been informed by police. Is that right?
Exactly, yes.
And you understand from the records that social services then emailed the ward manager and matron from Ruby Ward requesting an urgent update on your father's safeguarding inquiry, with social services confirming that a serious incident had occurred over the weekend and they were seeking information from the police. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Again, it's your understanding, is it, that nothing had appeared to have been communicated ahead of your call on the morning of the 5th?
Nothing at all, because social services did not know where Mum was.
Is it right that you understand from the records that the ward manager confirms that safeguarding remains open, and he confirms that he contacted the safeguarding team for advice on closing the safeguarding? Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And he records to social services that the safeguarding team wished to know your mother's whereabouts, the measures in place to protect her, as well as the measures in place to protect your father at home.
That's correct.
Is it right that from your reading of the records, it appears that the ward manager had no answers to these questions, and that he contacted your mother's care coordinator to find out those answers?
That's correct.
In response to social services, from what you've seen, you understand the ward manager has recorded that your mother's care coordinator was unable to you quote this in your statement, provide robust information.
That's correct, yes.
And as a consequence, you understand that a meeting was arranged to discuss this for the 16th of March, so the following day.
Yes, as far as I can recall from the records, yes.
In the meantime, is it your understanding, and this may be based on a discussion that your husband had with your mother's care coordinator, that your mother's care coordinator did not know where your mother was staying until the 16th?
That's correct, yes.
And so in spite of the fact that you had called social services on the 13th of March, whilst the incident with police was unfolding, and called them first thing on the Monday morning, and they had notified the ward manager and matron of a serious incident, as far as you understand it, the care coordinator wasn't aware of your mother's whereabouts at that time.
Exactly, yes.
I want to move on to the concerns that you articulate about the communication between Ruby Ward and your family. Towards the end of your statement, you describe yourself as the family spokesperson.
That's correct, yes.
Would it be right to say you also adopted this role throughout the period that we have focused on before your mother's death, in the January to March period?
No, my sister was involved in some of the correspondence, but then she became unwell. So following what's happened here, so she was too unwell.
And so would it be fair to say that effectively it was joint responsibility whilst your mother was still alive, and then afterwards you took on the role of spokesperson?
Yes, yes.
And to the extent that there was contact between mental health services and other members of your family, your mother's family, was it such that the information was being passed between you, so you were aware of what your sister was doing and vice versa?
Yes, exactly, yes.
You've explained in detail the extent to which information about your mother was communicated to you in the 9th of February video call meeting. At any stage were you told that your mother had not given consent for information about her care or treatment to be shared with you?
No, we weren't told that she hadn't given consent, no.
I want to turn briefly to the language used in the medical records with regards to the relationship between your mother and other family members. And you explain in your statement the breakdown in the relationship was due to your family's real fears of your mother's violence and aggression, and that you communicated this to Dr. B.
Exactly, yes.
And you referred to and expressed shock about seeing notes stating that there was no need for care of any sort or social services input, and describing the situation as a family feud. Is that right?
That's exactly what happened, yes.
Are you able to say how those written notes and that description matches up with the impression you were given by ward staff at the time when you discussed the difficult relationship your family had with your mother at that time?
I don't think that I don't know what they thought, really. I'm sure they didn't believe anything we said. I mean, it clearly wasn't important enough to put down in writing on the records at all. I think they just disregarded everything we said.
You explained that after your phone call with Dr. B on the 22nd of January, where he told you that he would not treat your mother and she would go home without support, your family felt you had no option but to complain and seek advice, and so your sister approached PALS for advice verbally. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you have since seen a record from the 27th of January recording advice from WR ward round was that nursing staff are not to contact family until advised otherwise, and noting that your family had contacted PALS. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Is it right that it was your view that your family's contact with PALS seems to have pushed the ward to refuse to speak to you?
That's correct, yes.
And are you able to recall whether there was a change in tone or a decline in the amount of contact from the ward staff at this time?
We didn't have much contact with them anyway. They were very, very difficult to get hold of on the phone. We tried to call numerous times to find out how Mum was doing, but it was almost impossible. I mean, sometimes when it was really, really important, I had to leave messages on Dr. B's secretary's answering machine, just so that I could get some information or give them information. It was very poor communication.
And you comment in your statement that during the patient safety incident investigation, ward staff accused your family of not contacting the ward, which you say is factually incorrect.
Yes.
And is it right that you say that far more calls were made by your family
Yes.
than are recorded in the medical records?
That's right, yeah. I mean, obviously I have to accept that a lot of the calls didn't get through because we just tried all day and sometimes into the evening, and it was virtually impossible. It just rang and rang and rang the phone. You couldn't get anybody to answer the phone on the ward.
And are you able to say roughly how regularly you and other family members were contacting the ward at that time?
Initially, obviously, very, very regularly, but obviously we got to the point where we just could not get through to them, so it seemed a futile exercise.
In terms of efforts made by the ward to rebuild the relationship between your mother and your family, on the 27th of January, the ward, is it right, did invite you and your sister to a video call with your mother?
They did, yes.
And you were also told, is this right, that your father was excluded as Ruby Ward felt that this would be triggering for your mother?
That's correct, yes.
And at the same time, was it your understanding that the intention at that time was for your mother to return home to live with your father, from the ward perspective?
I believe so, yes.
Is it right that the PSI investigation report concluded that mental health family group conferencing was something that should have been considered to rebuild your mother's relationships with her family before discharge?
That's correct, yes.
And as you understand it, this is certainly something that wasn't communicated to you, and as you understand it, wasn't explored?
Not at all.
You explain in your statement that no discussion was ever offered by the ward staff to see how, as a family, you might be able to help your mother.
That's correct, yes.
What, if anything, do you feel was done in order to provide information or suggestions about how you as a family might support your mother?
I don't think there was anything. I can't say there was anything that I can think of.
And is there anything further you would wish to say in relation to the engagement and communication that the ward had with your family?
It was appalling and virtually non-existent.
Thank you. I want to now turn to your concerns regarding the treatment of you and your family and the quality of investigations following your mother's death. On the 16th of March, your husband returned to your parents' address to meet police and collect clothing from for your father following his arrest on the 13th of March. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And when the officer who attended could not get a reply at the door, is it your understanding that he called for backup and other officers forced the door open, finding your mother dead in the locked bathroom?
That's correct, yes.
You understand that your husband was then questioned and held at the scene for a couple of hours whilst the police eliminated him as a suspect?
That's correct, yes.
Is it right that that evening, when the police returned the keys to you, you were told that they had done their best to clean up the bathroom?
That's correct, yes.
However, your husband later told you that when he, your son and brother-in-law went to clean it, they found the bathroom in complete disarray. And you describe wet blood-stained towels strewn across the floor, and several sharp blood-stained knives and blood-stains splattered around the bathroom. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Your son later told you how shocking it had been for him, and
Yes.
how surprised he was that family were expected to clear and clean up this type of death. Is that right?
He was, yes.
And you suggest, towards the conclusion of your statement, that families should be offered support following this type of death, and the inquiry should investigate this. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so. I don't think the family should be expected to have to do that.
Thank you. You understand that there was a post-mortem examination following your mother's death, which concluded that the cause of your mother's death was old age. and it's right to say that there was no inquest in your mother's case.
That's correct, yes.
I want to turn now to the formal complaints about your mother's care and treatment.
Yes.
It's right, is it, that these began a month before her death when your sister submitted an official complaint to PALS via email?
That's correct, yes.
And after receiving the documentation from your mother's GP, including Dr. A's report and diagnosis of bipolar?
That's correct, yes.
Is it right that this complaint was never effectively actioned, as you were told that your mother's permission was required to proceed with the complaint?
That's correct, yes.
And it's your understanding, is it, that PALS sent a letter to your mother at her temporary accommodation on the 11th of March, nearly a month later, but that she never signed it?
No, it was in her effects when she passed, but it hadn't been signed, no.
And that was the letter seeking the permission to allow, effectively, you to lodge the complaint on her behalf?
Exactly, yes.
Thereafter, after your mother's death, this complaint was then converted into the first patient safety incident investigation 5 days after your mother's death.
That's
Is that
correct,
right?
yes.
And you identified that the PALS system has no mechanism to action complaints made by anyone other than the patient without the patient's consent, and recommend that this should change. Is that right?
Exactly, yes.
And you say in your statement that often a patient is not in a position to raise a concern due to their illness, whether physical or mental, and family members, carers and friends must be able to raise the alarm and make a complaint on their behalf.
I think so, yes.
You refer in your statement then to a patient safety incident investigation about which you have a number of concerns. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Firstly, is it right that you consider that the fact that the member of the patient safety investigation team providing the safeguarding input was a member of the team who'd been responsible for your mother's safeguarding investigation? Is that right?
Yes, it was, yes.
And it's your view in your statement that this severely compromised the investigation?
I'm quite sure, yes.
Secondly, you describe the PSI making unfounded accusations about your family without any corroborative evidence. Are you able to provide further details as to the type or tenor of the allegations that you say were made in the report?
This actually refers, obviously, to the fact that they seem to believe there was some family feud going on. So,
do you know what that might have been the genesis of that? Did you ever find out?
no, I never did.
No.
No.
Thirdly, you outline failures in involving your family in the PSI investigation process, and in particular the need you refer to in your statement, the need to repeatedly chase responses from the family liaison officer, receiving the PSI investigation report 6 weeks after its completion, and not being given the opportunity to view and provide input on the draft report despite the clear guidance.
That's correct, yes.
And is it right that no explanation has ever been given to you for this 6 week delay in providing the report and the failure to share the draft with you?
No explanation has ever been given.
At paragraphs 287 and to 289 of your statement, you outline your efforts to chase a meeting that the family liaison officer had suggested to discuss your family's concerns arising from seeing your mother's medical records.
Yes.
Is it right that you received the medical records and then wanted to provide further input in terms of the concerns that
That's
you had?
right, because at that point we had no idea that the report had been signed off.
Yes. When you were able to secure a meeting, is it right that the EPUT complaints department had informed you that such a meeting could not include discussion of your further concerns and would be limited to the PSI investigation report itself?
That's correct, yes.
Thereafter, the Chief Executive of EPUT Complaints Department is it right, emailed stating that EPUT considered all matters raised to be addressed in the PSI investigation report and suggested that if you were dissatisfied, you should approach the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman.
That's correct, yes.
You then set out in detail at paragraphs 287 to 302 the steps you took thereafter to seek to get answers, including supplying a list of further issues to EPUT Complaints Department and completing the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman complaints form.
That's correct, yes.
And is it right that when you completed that form, you were told that EPUT had to respond to your further questions before the Ombudsman could intervene?
That's correct, yes.
You also outline a meeting that you had thereafter as part of what you understood to be a legal-style investigation in relation to your further complaints of EPUT.
That's correct, yes.
And on receipt of the report from that further investigation, you describe your frustration at yet another failure by EPUT to provide meaningful answers. Is that
That's correct,
right?
yes.
Is it right that thereafter, although you could have pursued the matter with the Parliamentary and Health Ombudsman, you and your family felt emotionally exhausted?
Exactly, yes.
And you refer to that emotionally exhausted in your statement, and as the family spokesperson at that point, is it right you felt you could not continue in that role?
No, that's right. We had another family bereavement and it just wasn't possible. We didn't have the strength anymore to pursue it.
You also mentioned contacting Health Watch, but not taking it any further because they were, as you understood it, only able to offer advocacy.
That's correct.
Are you able to say what stage that was in the chronology of when you contacted?
Yeah, I think that was... I don't know, I'd have to look, but I can't remember exactly what stage that was that we actually approached Health Watch.
You also refer to approaching the CQC by telephone call and registering a complaint, but then receiving no feedback or information following this complaint. Is that right?
I think that was after the PALS. My sister started the PALS complaint. I contacted the CQC.
So that was earlier in the process, was it?
It was, yes, much earlier.
And so would that have been whilst your mother was still alive?
Very possibly, yes.
And that was a call made by your sister?
No, I made the call to the CQC, yes.
Is there anything further you would wish to say about the accessibility of the complaints processes as you experienced them?
Just a complete and utter whitewash. It didn't get to the bottom of anything, really, and it was just such a frustrating process. I still don't know why these things happened and my mum died. I still don't understand why those things happened, so clearly it didn't work and doesn't work.
Thank you. I now want to go through the recommendations set out in your witness statement, and I will ask you if you'd like to say anything further about them or how they could have impacted on your mother's care and treatment. It may be that you feel we have covered them sufficiently already, but I'd like to just make sure you've had an opportunity to say everything you would like to say in respect of your recommendations. We have already discussed your recommendation that the PALS system introduce a mechanism to enable complaints to be made on behalf of a patient without their consent, and your recommendation that families should be offered support following the kind of bereavement you experience.
Yeah.
You outline further recommendations at pages 60 to 61 of your statement, largely from paragraph 349 onwards. Please, can we have page 60 on the screen, Amanda? And so you see there at paragraph 349, you express the view that getting to the truth is seriously hampered by the fact that services investigate themselves. And you propose in the next paragraph that investigations must be independent and strictly regulated. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
And is there anything further you would like to say about that?
Yes, I think investigating themselves gave EPUT the ability to basically cover things up. I think if it was done more independently, there may be an opportunity for the truth and understanding for the families. Yes, they cover up, they close ranks. I have no answers. I don't know if I ever will. I'm hoping here will hopefully give me some answers.
Yes. And at paragraph 353, at the bottom of the page, you describe the emphasis as wrongly placed on investigating systems and learning rather than individual culpability. Is that right?
Yes, I think there has to be accountability, and those that made the decisions ultimately lead to someone's death. They need to be accountable. No two ways, no ifs, buts, no maybes. And it happens time and time again because all we're doing is investigating the system and not investigating the people that are making the poor decisions.
And you say at the same paragraph that your experience is that learning is often never implemented or there are huge delays.
Yeah, I know that for a fact because the meeting we had in the December with the PSI team, when I quizzed them on had Ruby Ward had the learning carried out, they told me that that hadn't happened, and that was some night when Mum died in the March, and this was the December, and the learning, as far as I could glean from them, had not happened.
Thank you.
And they couldn't actually give me a date when it was going to happen.
And if we can turn to page 61, at paragraph 355, you express the view that where the death of a patient or serious injury is suspected, individual staff members should be prevented from continuing to work with vulnerable individuals until the investigation is complete.
I think that's the only way to safeguard people because, I don't know, unless there's some accountability, it's just going to keep on happening time and time again.
There is then a heading Recommendations for Change, under which you express your family's view that with proper assessment, diagnosis, treatment and support for your mother and family, you could all have been looking at a very different outcome for your mother and father.
I believe that, categorically. If Mum had been treated, things would have been different. My dad wouldn't have been pushed down a legal route that he never should have had to have gone down. My mum was totally unable to do anything legal herself because she was in such turmoil, you know, to be actually pushed down that route, that the only way you can stay safe is for you to take legal action. But still, Mum was unwell and needed help. She needed treatment, she needed a proper diagnosis, and none of that ever happened. So, yes, I think the outcome could have been very, very different.
Thank you. Jane, I don't have any further questions for you at this stage.
Yep.
Chair, do you have any questions?
I don't.
Amanda, please can we have the photographs of Dot on the screen? We will now show 2 photographs of your mother, Dot. Jane, we will now have a 10-minute break to see if there are any further questions. If there aren't any, that concludes your evidence and you'll be free to leave. Thank you again for the evidence you've given today and previously.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank
It's
you.
been very, very helpful to me to hear from you today.